Hi, and welcome to this live reading from Whispers in the Waters by Sarah Chislon, and this is presented by Itsy Bitsy Book Bits. Chapter 1. A proper lady has no secrets. She offers smiles to potential suitors, moves with effortless grace through crowded ballrooms and theaters, and charms all with her words. She conceals nothing society might find troubling and nothing the world might examine and condemn. What I kept concealed meant I'd never qualify as a proper lady, but I'd always believed Aunt Caris to be the epitome of a gentlewoman, until the fateful morning the letter from Milburn arrived, hinting she held secrets of her own. A quarter hour earlier, Ada and Ainsley had departed to pay a call on Aunt Melusina, and in the absence of my sisters, a hush settled over the house. In the blissful quiet, I sorted through one of the thick notebooks containing my sketches and records on various herbs in hopes of finding the perfect addition to the salve I was attempting to formulate for Ainsley. She'd asked me to concoct a solution to remove the peculiar silvery gray scar etched across her upper arm, one which had resisted all efforts to erase its existence so far. I enjoyed the puzzle of combining and recombining plants with various healing properties to find the ones best suited, despite the fact that something in the unusual symmetry of her scar appeared to me more appealing than distasteful. Ainsley had claimed it was a small matter, scarce worth a mention, only do you think you might have something on hand to treat it? Yet when she'd spoken, her lively features had stilled, and her usual smile had faded. No matter my opinion, the scar clearly troubled her, and that provided reason enough for its removal. Sunlight poured through the wide windows of the morning room, refracting light from the fountain across the pages of my book and blurring the inked images. Never mind that no one had seen Nissy this far from a crossing in years. Every home that could manage it still kept a fountain somewhere to appease the household fae, who preferred running water for their ablutions. But at least so tradition held. If one could avoid enmity from the other kind, so much the better for one's health. I shifted positions and rifled through several more pages before landing on an entry for Briony, its tiny white flowers and dark leaves common enough in the hedges and byways, its root valued for cleansing the skin. Perhaps this would complement the others I planned to include in the salve, which held more soothing properties. I tapped the image, considering. This endeavor would be best accomplished in the gardens, where instinct could partner with analysis, but Aunt Caris preferred to stay in company, even if we exchanged no conversation, and I couldn't disappoint her. Across from me, she penned the final lines of an invitation to the small dinner party she intended to hold in a fortnight. Her face creased in a smile as she stacked the completed invitation atop its companions. Even at rest, she looked radiant as a sunbloom, her coppery hair as striking as its richly hued petals, her full figure sharing its soft curves. She capped the bottle of ink and returned it to her small round work table. There, that's done. Unless you wish to invite anyone to dinner, Jessa. I'd rather flee to the safety of Father's study for the evening than join the party, let alone add to its number. But I could never confess that to Aunt Caris. I placed a ribbon to mark my entry on Briony and set the book aside. No, thank you, Aunt Caris. I'm certain you've already planned the guest list to perfection. Though she didn't permit herself a full smile, her eyes crinkled at the corners as if she perceived that which I'd left unspoken. Whatever exhortation she might have offered, our butler Holden interrupted, arriving with the post. I welcomed the delivery, since I hoped the morning post would bring an answer from Milton and Sons, the publisher I believed might be a good fit for my herbalism guide. Despite how often my expectations had been dashed, anticipation blossomed as constant and sweet as a carpet of violets in spring. After Holden left, I sorted the letters, a lengthy missive from a fellow herbalist for me, 2 notes for Ada, and 3 for Ainsley, more than likely from lovelorn suitors, and a letter for Aunt Caris, along with a large stack of invitations which would delight Ada and Ainsley alike. But even a second, more thorough search failed to reveal a message from Milton and Sons. My spirits sank at the delay. Would they be one of many to decry my guide as too costly an undertaking, never mind the need it filled? Aunt Caris glanced up, her green eyes bright. Anything for me, my dear? There are a number of invitations, but only one letter. I offered her a small envelope with her name scrawled across the front. Its paper was the pale brown of a withered beech leaf, which was unusual given that most ladies favored crisp white pages for their correspondence, often perfumed and written in flourishing script. Aunt Karis opened her letter and skimmed the contents. Then she crumpled it into the pocket of her gown and stood abruptly, her ever-blooming cheeks pale. Unease pricked along my spine. Did you receive bad news? What? She started and then clutched at her pocket as if it contained a burning ember. No, of course not, dear. It's just a headache. Aunt Karis did not possess the art of dissembling, and though she rubbed her temples, I distrusted her words. I believe I'll go rest for a bit, she said. I rose as well, her disquiet wakening my own. Shall I prepare some lavender tea? If I add willow bark, it might ease the pain. Yes, dear, that would be lovely, but there's no hurry. Despite her expression of gratitude, her voice remained abstracted, and she wandered from the morning room like one in a dream. I watched her go, and a knot forming in my stomach. Since Mother's passing 14 years ago, Aunt Karis had provided continual love and care for us, looking after Ada, Ainsley, and me as if we were her blood daughters. She always overflowed with kindness, lively goodwill, and sometimes a propensity toward overmanagement of our affairs, but she'd certainly never succumbed to the vapors or indulged in unnecessary theatrics, no matter how trying the circumstances. If something troubled her, it must be a situation worthy of concern, not a frivolous matter. The knot in my stomach tightened. I wanted to run after her and demand answers, but she clearly desired peace and privacy. Perhaps after an interval of solitude, she'd be more amenable to discussion. So instead, I made my way to the glass house, which sheltered my more delicate plants from the chill that still crept into our early spring days. As I wove through the garden, the plants pressed upon my awareness like the prickling of a thorn into tender flesh. Their voices called to me, the bright, chirpy notes of the yellow and white hellebore bobbing along the path, the shy, whispered tones of the delicate lily of the valley, and the sap-sticky sweep of maple limbs bowing in the breeze. No, I shouldn't listen, shouldn't hear such things. Normal people didn't, so neither would I. If Father found out these aberrations had returned and indeed strengthened, he would be crushed. When I first experienced the whispers after Mother's passing, he'd done an admirable job of constructing an argument that they'd come as a result of her death. He believed they were my unconscious attempt to stay close to her by connecting with the stories of the other world that she loved to share, an influence heightened in times of emotional stress. An influence that was essential to shut down lest word escape and scandal ensue, or worse, lead to accusations of fae-touched that would bring down the wrath of the vigil and land me in an institution. Since I was small, he had warned me to seek calm and lock untidy emotions away to prevent this fault from overcoming me, which meant I couldn't allow the upset experienced by Aunt Karis to become my own. She would not wish it, not after all she and Father had done for me. I entered the glass house, and the pressure increased as each living thing vied for my attention. A throbbing ache built at the nape of my neck. Blight and rot, this would never do. With a long practiced motion, I gathered the strands of emotion and sensation and locked them deep inside in a cage of thorned vines I wove within my mind. Aunt Karis would be well, and if she were not, I would help make her so. I drew in one deep breath, then another. I wouldn't surrender to these aberrations, not today, not as long as I kept the strength to resist. At last, my efforts brought silence, and the glass house became a refuge once more. I inhaled slowly, absorbing their familiar fragrances. Surely there was nothing objectionable in smelling the flowers. The bitter acrimony of wormwood, ready to bite and purge, the soft perfume of lavender, ever inclined to comfort and soothe, and the fresh, grassy scent of chamomile. All these and more wafted around me as I pulled a small pair of shears from their peg on the wall and made my way toward the table, which housed several varieties of lavender. I snipped a handful of buds, careful to remove only a little from each plant in a manner that would encourage further growth. And then a faint rustle broke through my enforced silence. I was so determined to shut out any possible aberration and give my attention only to gathering lavender, I almost ignored it, until it came again, unmistakable, and followed by a slight moan. I turned. In the shadowed corner on the north wall, where the glass house nestled against our town home, something stirred. My pulse picked up. I grabbed a shovel and crept forward. Slowly, my sight adjusted to the relative dim. A large cat lurked beneath one of my plant shelves in piteous condition. Bedraggled, inky fur cloaked a body rent with wounds, and a tremendous thick tail matted with blood wrapped close around its bulky frame. What a dreadful scrap it must have endured. A pale patch like a starflower spread across its chest, and from the torn face, jade eyes glared at me. I cast the shovel aside and extended my hand. It drew back with a hiss. How on earth had the creature come to shelter here unseen? No matter, it needed aid. I spoke in a soothing undertone. You're safe here, and if you let me closer, I can help. Kept up a patter of reassurances as I fetched my leather gardening gloves, protection should the cat lash out. When I reached for it once more, it bared threatening fangs. I rocked back on my heels. If you let me take you to the house, I'll see you well tended. You must be hungry. I'm sure we have some fine scraps for you to enjoy, and maybe a bit of milk also. The stream of chatter appeared to calm it, so I continued. It's clear you fought well and come off with your life and perhaps even the victory, but if I'm to help you now, you must allow me close. The cat surveyed me, black pupils narrowing, and then, as if it understood, it dropped its stance of war and let its body slump. I tucked the basket with the lavender buds in the crook of my elbow. Then I lifted the cat and cradled it to my chest. Even with both my arms wrapped securely around it, it spilled over, its head resting on my shoulder and its legs down low around my waist, its bulk unbalancing me at first. Not for the first time I wished for a sturdier frame, but one must make the best of the resources given. In this proximity to the cat, the earth-iron tang of old blood choked me, but I continued to murmur softly as I staggered into the house. In the washroom, I laid it down on a clean towel. Stay here. I'll be back. I hurried down the stairs to the lowest level, which housed the kitchen. The honeyed fragrance of baking pastries wafted out to greet me. Our cook, Estine, thin as a reed despite her frequent sampling of her own wares, had a deft touch with all manner of baked goods and prided herself on turning them out fresh to accompany every meal. She served our family since mother and father wed, and after mother's death, she'd sought to comfort all three of us girls by inviting us into the warm bustle of her kitchen. When I crossed the threshold, she turned with a welcoming smile that faded the moment she saw me. Mercies, Miss Jessa, are you hurt? I glanced down at my front. Blood streaked the pale muslin of my gown, likely creating indelible stains. Small wonder I had startled her. It's not my blood. I found an injured cat in the glass house. And you just had to wrangle it, did you? She examined me more closely, a frown creasing her face. You certain it didn't scratch you? It might well carry all sorts of disease. It's not ill, only injured, and I couldn't leave it there to die. She brushed flour from her hands. Maybe not, but Ives could have fetched the creature for you, I'm sure. No need for you to muss yourself, Miss Jessa, none at all. It was simple enough for me to handle the situation with the aid of a footman. I placed the basket of lavender on the long table in the center of the room. I've only come for hot water and some rags. Once I've tended the cat, I'll return to make some tea for Aunt Karis, if you don't mind setting out the tray. Muttering under her breath about the fate of those ladies inclined toward independence and wild risks, as if the simple matter of attending an injured animal was the equivalent of venturing into the heart of a crossing, she filled a pitcher and passed it to me, along with a basin and a few worn linens. Then I went to the still room where I stored my dried herbs and fetched some valerian root. Armed for possible battle, I returned to the washroom. The cat still rested on the towel, but it inclined its head toward me when I entered, a surprisingly regal gesture given its condition. I offered the valerian, my best hope of calming it enough to tend its wounds. It pricked its ears toward the pungent-smelling root and nibbled the herb, its body gradually easing into a state of relaxation. The shift in position revealed that despite her size, the cat was female. If she was willing to stay, she'd need a name, but that could come later. Though she wouldn't be able to understand, I quietly presented the facts, assuring her I intended only to help, though the process might be painful. She batted my arm with her paw and then returned to her rest. After I drew in a breath to steady myself, I cleansed the cuts on her face, working slowly toward the worst of her wounds, a long rent down her side, clotted in places, seeping in others. Though the cat gave a low moan as I tended her injuries, she didn't strike out. For whatever reason, she'd decided to trust me, or at least not fight my attempts to render aid. At last, with the deepest gash bandaged and slathered with a thick unguent and the lesser cuts and scrapes anointed with a lighter salve, I bundled the cat, towel and all, into my arms and climbed the numerous stairs to my bedchamber, located on the third floor of our townhouse. Slightly out of breath, I placed the cat on a cushioned chair. Now for Aunt Karis.